When the settlement was being packed up after November 18, 1978, the people assigned to the task found, in Jim Jones's personal quarters, almost nothing. Not almost nothing in the way that a minimalist keeps almost nothing, deliberately, as a philosophical statement about attachment and possession. Almost nothing in a different way. In the way of a space that had been stripped, gradually and systematically, of the accumulated personal material that people accumulate when they live somewhere for years. The books were community books. The furniture was community furniture. The papers were organizational papers, already part of the documentary record that the investigators would eventually catalog and archive. Jones had lived in those quarters for the better part of 2 years. The personal residue of 2 years of human habitation should have been more substantial than what was there. The people doing the inventory noted the sparseness. They did not, in the chaos of the aftermath, pursue the question of where the personal material had gone. They cataloged what was there and moved on. And what was there, the one item in Jones's quarters that the inventory records note as personal, as distinct from organizational or communal, was a small wooden box, approximately 8 inches long and 4 inches wide, with a simple clasp and no lock. The box contained a photograph and a letter. The photograph was of a woman the investigators did not recognize. The letter was in Jones's handwriting. It was not addressed to anyone. It was not signed. It was 11 lines long, and it has never been published in any account of Jonestown. The box is in the archive. The photograph is in the archive. The letter is in the archive. And the researcher who found them, who spent 3 years working through the personal effects documentation before encountering the inventory notation and another year tracking the box through the chain of custody that had moved it from Jonestown to Georgetown to Washington to the archive where it now sits, describes the experience of reading the 11 lines for the first time as the moment in 4 years of Jonestown research when she understood something she had not understood before. Not about the organization, about the man, about what he had carried into the jungle and what he had kept when everything else was stripped away, and what the keeping of it, alone in a box in a stripped room in a settlement at the end of the world, tells you about the thing that was underneath everything Jones built. The box is the most personal document in the Jonestown archive, and it has been sitting there, catalogued and unexamined, for decades. If you have ever wondered what a person like Jim Jones kept when he kept almost nothing, what object, what image, what 11 lines of handwriting survived the stripping of everything else, subscribe right now and hit the bell, because the answer is in the archive. And the answer changes the question. Not what Jones did, who he was before he did it, who he was carrying, in a box with a simple clasp, into the jungle. Go back to the inventory. The notation is brief. One line in a multi-page catalog of the settlement's assets and effects produced in the weeks following November 18th. Personal effects, J. Jones quarters, 1 wooden box, contents photograph and document, handwritten. The investigators who produced the inventory were not literary analysts or psychologists or historians. They were people doing a job under conditions of extreme stress, cataloging the remains of a catastrophe. The box was noted because the protocol required noting personal effects separately from organizational materials. It was not examined in depth, not at the time. It moved through the chain of custody, Georgetown, then a government facility in Washington, then eventually the academic archive where the Jonestown materials were consolidated with the notation attached and nothing more. Decades passed. Researchers worked through the archive. The box was there. The notation was there. No researcher, in the years between 1978 and the researchers' arrival 4 years ago, had pulled the box from its location and examined its contents with the attention that its contents deserved. The researcher who finally did is a historian named Sarah Okonkwo, who has spent 15 years working on what she describes as the private history of Jonestown. Not the organizational history, not the political history, not the history of the manipulation and the control mechanisms and the catastrophe, but the interior history. The history of what the people inside the settlement were carrying that the organizational record does not capture. She had been through the archive many times before she found the inventory notation. She had looked at thousands of documents. She had developed, over 15 years, a specific sense of which documents were likely to contain something the existing literature had not yet processed. The inventory notation triggered that sense immediately. 1 wooden box, contents photograph and document, handwritten. In the personal quarters of a man who kept almost nothing personal. She pulled the box the following morning. The photograph first. A woman, approximately 30 years old in the photograph, which shows the marks of age and handling that suggest it was taken at least 20 years before Jonestown, which would place it in the late 1950s, when Jones was in his mid to late 20s, in the early years of his ministry in Indianapolis. The woman is not posed formally. She is caught in a moment of turning, half-profile, looking at something outside the frame. She is smiling at whatever she is looking at. The smile is the kind of smile that belongs to the thing being looked at, not to the camera. It is not a photograph smile, not the expression produced for documentation. It is an expression produced for a person. And whoever is taking the photograph is capturing it from a position close enough to be in the woman's orbit, close enough that she has not adjusted her expression for the camera, close enough that the photograph feels less like a record and more like an intrusion on a private moment. The woman's name is not written anywhere on the photograph. On the back, in handwriting that Okonkwo confirmed, through comparison with authenticated samples, is Jones's, are two words, a first name and a date. The first name is a common name. The date is 1959, nothing else. Okonkwo spent 6 months trying to identify the woman. She searched the Indianapolis records, the church membership documents, the personal correspondence that survived from Jones's early ministry. She found, in the records of a church Jones had been affiliated with in the late 1950s, a membership list that included a woman with the first name written on the back of the photograph. She found, in a separate document from the same period, a reference to the same name in connection with a community program Jones had been running. She found one more reference, a brief mention in a personal letter Jones wrote to a colleague in 1960. The year after the date on the photograph. The mention is oblique. It does not describe a relationship. It says only, I have been thinking about a matter I cannot resolve. Some things do not resolve. I am learning to carry them instead. The name is not in the letter, but the letter is from 1960, a year after the date on the photograph, and the timing, combined with the photograph in the box, combined with the 11 lines in the box, combined with the fact that this box is the only personal item Jones kept through 2 years in Jonestown, suggests to Okonkwo a connection that she is careful not to overstate but that the accumulation of circumstantial evidence makes, in her assessment, more probable than not. The 11 lines. Okonkwo does not publish the complete text of the letter in her paper. She explains this decision carefully. The letter is addressed to no one and signed by no one, and its relationship to the photograph is inferential rather than documented, and publishing the full text without the ability to establish that relationship with certainty would risk producing a misleading account of its meaning. She publishes instead a description of the letter's content and 2 direct quotations from it that she believes can be shared without producing that misleading account. The description is this: the letter is written in Jones's handwriting in the present tense, as if composed at the time of writing rather than copied from an earlier draft. It describes, in language that Okonkwo characterizes as more direct and less rhetorical than any other Jones document she has encountered in 15 years of research, a specific kind of loss. Not the loss of something taken, the loss of something set aside. Something that Jones describes, in the letter, as having been set aside in the belief that it could be returned to, and that, the letter indicates, cannot be returned to. The 2 quotations Okonkwo publishes are these. First, I thought the work was the answer to this. I was wrong about that. The work is the answer to everything except this. Second, I am keeping this because putting it down would mean deciding it is finished. I am not able to decide that yet. Okonkwo spent 3 years with the letter after finding it. She is careful, in her account, about what she is and is not claiming. She is not claiming that the photograph and the letter explain Jonestown. She is not claiming that a private loss, whatever the loss described in 11 lines was, whoever the woman in the photograph was, caused or produced or in any simple sense led to the catastrophe of November 18, 1978. She is claiming something more limited and more important: that the box existed, that Jones kept it, that he kept it through the entire Jonestown period, in a room that was stripped of everything else, in a settlement that he built at the end of the world, in the last 2 years of his life, that the keeping was a choice, and that the choice of the decision, described in the letter itself, not to put it down, not to decide it was finished, is a window into something that the organizational history of Jonestown does not reach. Not the leader, not the manipulator, not the pharmaceutical case study or the political operator or the architect of control. The person who set something aside in the belief that it could be returned to and who discovered, at some point, that it could not, and who did not put it down, and who carried it into the jungle in a box with a simple clasp, and who kept it there until the end. Stephen Jones, when Okonkwo contacted him about the box and described its contents, was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I did not know about the box. I knew there was a before he did not talk about. I have said that to other researchers. There was a before and it was closed. But I did not know he had kept something from it, that he had taken something from the before into the jungle with him. He paused. Then he said, I think I understand why he kept it. I think putting it down would have required him to become someone he did not know how to be. Someone for whom the thing in the box was finished. And he did not know how to be finished with it. So he was never finished with it. He carried it. He built everything around it. He built Jonestown around it. 918 people lived inside the thing he built around something he could not put down. And he never told anyone what it was. He was quiet again. Then he said,
I am not angry about the box. I thought I would be, when you told me, but I am not. I am something else. I think I am sad.
Because putting something in a box and carrying it into the jungle is not a monstrous thing.
It is a very human thing.
It is the thing everyone does with the things they cannot put down.
He just did it at a scale that made it catastrophic. He was just a man who could not put something down.
And 918 people lived inside what he built because he could not put it down.
And that is the saddest thing I know about my father.
Not the worst thing.
The saddest. The box is in the archive. The photograph is in it. The 11 lines are in it. The woman's name is on the back of the photograph. The date is 1959.
And the second quotation from the letter. I am keeping this because putting it down would mean deciding it is finished. I am not able to decide that yet is the most honest thing Jim Jones ever wrote.
Written to no one. Kept in a box. Carried into the jungle. Found after the end.
Still there. Still unfinished. The way the things we cannot put down are always unfinished. The way they wait in boxes, in rooms, in the spaces between what we build and what we are building around. Still there. Still the thing we carried. Still the thing we could not decide was finished. Still, after everything. Still. Okonkwo's paper was published in 2019. She is careful. She does not overreach. She presents what she found, acknowledges what she was not able to establish, and offers the box as what she calls an opening rather than a conclusion. A window, small and partially obscured, into the before that Stephen Jones described as closed. Into the thing Jones was carrying when he built everything. The woman in the photograph has never been identified with certainty. Okonkwo found the first name and the circumstantial connections to the Indianapolis period and the reference in the 1960 letter, and she could not go further than that.
The paper notes, in its final section, that a more complete identification might be possible with access to records that are currently restricted or incomplete.
It notes that the woman, if she is still alive, would be in her 80s or 90s. It notes that the identification, if it could be made, would not necessarily change the interpretation of the box but would allow the account to be grounded in something more than circumstance.
The note is there, in the paper, as an opening, as an invitation,
as the acknowledgement that the work is not finished, that the box is not finished, that the 11 lines are not finished, that the woman in the photograph, turning towards something outside the frame, smiling a smile that belongs to a person rather than a camera, in 1959 in Indianapolis, before People's Temple, before California, before Guyana, before the jungle and the end, that she is still there, in the photograph, in the box, in the archive,
still turning, still smiling, still the thing Jones could not decide was finished, and the archive is open, and the question is there, and the box is there,
and someone, eventually, will find the answer that Okonkwo could not find.
Will find the name behind the first name on the back of the photograph. Will find what the connection was.
Will find what Jones set aside and could not return to and could not put down and carried into the jungle and kept in the box with the simple clasp in the stripped room at the end of the world. And when that answer is found, it will not explain Jonestown, but it will tell us one more true thing about the man who built it. One more true thing about the before that was closed. One more true thing about the thing he carried. The thing he could not decide was finished. Still in the box. Still in the archive. Still waiting. The last thing Okonkwo writes in her paper, after the analysis and the careful qualification and the 2 quotations from the 11 lines, is not academic.
It is 4 sentences. She writes,
I have spent 15 years on the interior history of Jonestown, on what people carried that the organizational record does not capture. I expected to find, at the center of that interior history, something large and dark and inexplicable.
I found a box.
A small wooden box, 8 inches long, with a simple clasp and no lock, containing a photograph of a woman turning towards something outside the frame and 11 lines that a man wrote to no one about something he could not put down.
That is what was at the center. That is what he carried. That is what, when everything else was stripped away, was left. A box. A photograph. 11 lines. The most human thing in the archive. The most ordinary thing. The thing that was there before everything else and that was still there at the end. Still in the box. Still unfinished.
There is one more detail in Okonkwo's paper that has not yet been discussed. A detail that she includes in a footnote rather than in the main text, explaining in the footnote that she is not certain of its significance and does not want to overweight it in the primary argument. The detail is this: the wooden box, when Okonkwo examined it, showed signs of regular handling.
Not the handling of an object taken out occasionally and looked at.
The handling of an object touched often. The clasp was worn smooth in the specific place where a thumb would press it to open. The interior lining, a simple cloth, once perhaps red, faded to a color without a clear name, was compressed in the pattern that fabric compresses when a hand rests on it repeatedly. The photograph, when Okonkwo removed it from the box, came out with the ease of something removed and replaced many times.
Jones had been opening the box regularly
in Jonestown, in the 2 years before November 18th, while running an organization of hundreds of people and managing the night broadcasts and the white night drills and the pharmaceutical regimen and the political relationships and all the mechanisms of control that the organizational history documents, he had been opening the box,
looking at the photograph, reading the 11 lines, and closing the box again, and going back to whatever Jonestown required of him that day. The worn clasp,
the compressed lining, the photograph that came out with the ease of something removed and replaced many times, the evidence that the box was not just kept,
it was visited, again and again.
In the jungle, at the end of the world, inside the thing he built around the thing he could not put down.
He kept going back to it.
The way you go back to the things you cannot put down.
The way you open the box and look and close the box and go back to your life and carry the box with you and open it again. The worn clasp.
The photograph of a woman turning towards something outside the frame.
The 11 lines written to no one. Opened, closed, opened, until the end.